146, right? 146 Air Support Operations Squadron, Air National Guard. They're based down actually at the airport in Oklahoma City, okay? But they support active duty combat missions, okay? And we have today Major Sean Taps, Tech Sergeants Vaughn, Mansell, and Senior Byers, and the acting commander, like right here, Lieutenant Colonel Clyde. Basically, these guys are going to give you a rundown on, like we said before, like Cadet Hirsch sent the message out. This is where the rubber meets the road when it comes to Army and Air Force supporting each other, or Air Force supporting the Army, etc. The interaction. This is where it happens. So I'm going to turn this over to Major Taps, and it's going to be their show.
Thank you. All right. Thanks for having us all out. As you said, we're from the 146th Air Support Operations Squadron. I'm going to kind of set this up a little bit, a little background information. Tech Sergeants Vaughn and Mansell here just returned from Afghanistan. So in December, so there's ones in the OCPDC sitting up there. So if you've got specific questions about operations, I'm not going to delve into a whole lot of that because of the classified nature. But if you've got questions about what's been going on over there, these are your crackdown. As far as some other background stuff. Colonel Clyde here comes from a background flying the F-111s, F-111s, and the F-16. I'm also an F-16 driver by trade. So as we're going through this or after the fact, if you got questions along those lines as well, we can talk about it. Big picture for today, before I get into anything else. You're all adults, you're all aspiring to become officers in the United States military, so I'm going to treat you as such. We're going to talk about where the rubber meets the road. So at the end of the day, our job is to kill folks and break their stuff. So we're going to talk a lot about how we go about doing that. There's going to be some doctrine involved, especially for some of our Army folks in here, and show you how we're able to do that as two separate services with two very different ways of doing business and where that all comes together. So you hear me mention the words blue, I'm referring to Air Force, green is Army, and purple is all of us putting happily together. So we'll get that out of the way up front. So I'm going to keep this fairly informal. There's going to be a lot of stuff to include acronyms, as we all live in that world. So if something doesn't make sense or you've got additional questions, feel free at any time to ask, so I can not skip over something that's going to miss concepts, put all the pieces together. So feel free to interject at any moment. All right. Standard one each military briefing. Here's what we're going to talk about today. You can read that for yourselves. And we'll talk in detail as we get into the doctrine section and tax ags. We'll start breaking a lot of that out. I'm going to use our squadron specifically as kind of a model. So I'll show you how we're kind of laid out. I'll talk about some of the differences with other ASOLs because they're all over the place, especially for those folks that may be interested in going tactical air control party, TAC-B. On the active duty side, some places you may be able to call home if you A, want to, and B, are worthy to make that through. All right, some acronyms here. TAC-B, for short, that's what we refer to ourselves as, Tactical Air Control Party. There's a whole lot of folks with different specialties within that Tactical Air Control Party. I'll talk more about that. Close air support, that is what we do. That is why we integrate with the Army. So we'll get into definitions in the doctrine section, but CAS. When I say CAS, that's what I'm talking about. JTAC is a specific qualification, Joint Terminal Attack Controller. We'll talk a lot more about that. Your liaison officer. A couple of us in this room, we were folks on the Army Special Staff that kind of build that bridge. BALO is at the battalion level for those green folks in the room who understand the hierarchy. We can talk for days on building all the terminology. EBALO is one of my more senior NCOs that is able to pick up that function. I don't necessarily have to have an officer against some of those functions. The TAC team, we're referring to that is one by Joint Terminal Attack Controller and one by man team right now, as far as the TAP team is concerned. It's a male with their battlefield airmen, just like PJs or CCT, combat patrol. So no offense, ladies, but that's what it is. We'll talk some about integration of some of our Army folks with special qualifications, the JFOs, the fire servers, and how we use those folks in the battle space, and what the Army plan is for that. We'll talk briefly about PISOF, Precision Strike Suite for Special Operations Forces. Gives us some advanced capabilities. That's the equipment section, rover, our ability to view targeting pod, predator feeds, all the depth TV you see on CNN. It allows us to view that real time while we're out in the field. And we've got over 5 sitting here like look at later. Some of the other stuff, the LLAB, the IR pointer, how we can operate at night. We're going to talk in the doctrine section, and I would hope that how many seniors we got? Okay, really healthy smattering. So we'll talk about air casting order stuff. I'm sure that's not a foreign term to you, especially those of you that have been around a while. We'll talk about the targeting cycle and how that works for close air support, FP, and how we interface with the Army on that. We'll talk certainly about the ACO, along with that, and how we are able to manage our airspace and what that means in our line of work. GFO I had in there twice, my apologies. And then talk about 13 Lima is what you're going to hear me say. That's the AFSC for the green folks in the room. That's your MOS. That is the officers that we're grooming into TACP to be in this career field. And we talk about the implications of what that means for us. That will be dedicated TACP for the bulk of their career because it is so specialized and they're so hard to provide. And then the 1 Charlie 4 AFSC is the enlisted TACP. Got 3 of them sitting up here in front. About that. We'll talk more about that. All right, as far as the 146 ASOS, we're a brand new unit. Relatively speaking, stood up in late 2008. We're directly reporting to the TAG's office, the Adjutant General of the State of Oklahoma. So we don't really fall into standard Air Force structure. We don't have a wing, per se, locally that we fall into. Direct. But we do live at the base down at Fort Rogers. It's owned by the 137th Airfield. But we are simply a tenant on our base. As far as the Army line goes for us, and this will come into play a little later in the brief on how different units get lined, we are aligned with 2 different troop grade combat units. So basically, each IBCT that we support is about 3,200 folks. That's what you're looking at as far as combat capability. Currently, we've got a couple folks just recently back, still have a whole bunch of folks deployed currently, including our squadron commander, supporting the 45th. So I'm sure a lot of you probably know folks that are either deployed or have been recently deployed with the rest of our brethren. We also support the 79th. Based out of San Diego. So we're really kind of spread thin. Just frankly, we had, what, 19, I think, total? Trying to cover down on a 3,200 person brigade from the Army. And we've got 2 of those groups. So, all right. The 13 Lima program, which is why we're really here talking to y'all. This is a fairly new concept across TACP, and as we get into more of the doctrine and CAS specifics, I think it will probably make a little more sense. But traditionally speaking, in the past, the air liaison officers have been graded folks, folks walk around wearing wings. They come into the career field for a brief period of time, provide the officership and kind of the overhead. But it's fairly limited in time, and then bang, you're off to your next job. Or back to your airplane or staff tour, whatever it may be. But it has not led to a lot of continuity throughout the TACP community. The flip side of that also is most tactical career fields, and I'll use the F-16 as an example, you've got a cadre of instructors that are very experienced. We call it the fire weapons school. It used to be fire weapons school, now it's just the weapons school down at Dallas Air Force Base. But they provide here's the standard of how we're going to do business, period, dot, end of story, and have the latest and greatest as far as our tactics, techniques, and procedures that we use. And we have not had that in the tactical. So we've got a lot of rapid turnover with the leadership. And so the 13 LLAB program is our first step in grooming career officers into this career field to become extremely good at what they do. There's a lot to it. We'll talk more about the pipeline here momentarily, but it's not for everybody. And I say that with all seriousness, that not everybody's going to be cut out either. Because of the physical standards that have to be met. This isn't your standard Air Force or Army PT test that you have to do. You've got to be able to hang with all the guys carrying, guns, bullets, beans, and water and everything else, but then all of this that you see here in addition to it. So these gentlemen can certainly talk more about their recent experience with it and how they get out. But it's pretty aggressive. And as a young officer in this career field, you're not going to be sitting back at headquarters like you might think you would be. You're going to be out on the front lines with everybody else. So you've got to be a proficient shooter. You've got to know ground maneuver tactics. You've got to know how to run all of this stuff in addition to it, and then get room to have all the air sense that those of us that have been flying airplanes require. So it's not for the faint heart. We'll leave it at that. But the overall purpose is to provide that continuity, provide that cadre, provide that structure that's not rapidly turning over like it has been in the past. As far as the pipeline goes, if selected, and not my understanding, do we have one individual that's got a AAA date? Yes. It's in March. Good luck. Enjoy it. So, big picture is, if you choose to go to this career field or some of the other battlefield airman routes, the way it kind of works out is you go to an ALO assessment, they call it the AAA program. They'll go put you through the ringer, make sure that you're capable of moving on to the next step. From there, if you're successful, graduate, obviously, get your commission, go down to Culver Field, 4.5 months. 18 weeks. 18 weeks. And these gentlemen can certainly talk more about what that entails. Typically, it's sitting at about a 50% washout rate. And the folks that go into it typically have their stuff together for the most part. And it's a lot of injuries, a lot of very intense physical work. So, it's not cut out for everybody. Not everyone's cut out for the portion. From there, if you're successful, then it's a couple weeks of joint firepower course, which is a fantastic course if you ever get a chance down at Dallas Air Force Base, immediately followed by AOPC, which is an additional 2 weeks. And then you go to SEL to go through JPOS. So that's kind of the entrance to be part of the club. Not in Syria. All TAC go 3 weeks a month. Seriously. You get the meetings course of it. Loved it. Don't want to go back.
Great training. Don't want to go
once took that square and moving on now. So it's, but no. So that's kind of the general pipeline as far as what it takes to get into the career field and some of the training that takes. All right. As far as us as an example, and this is fairly common across the Guard. Big picture for the blue suiters in the room, if you were to go TAC B, just realize that you will not be living at your one each Air Force base. You will be at a variety of Army forms. And that's where a lot of that crosstalk occurs, because our entire purpose is to support Army operations. As an Air Force TAC B, you will be living at a Fort Cook or a Fort Riley. You will be dislocated from the rest of the Air Force that you're used to. All right, as far as the brigade combat teams, obviously we are aligned with 2 infantry brigade combat anybody that's a landowner in the Army that is responsible for a piece of dirt in that situation has to act legally. So in our case, we've got 2 BCTs, piece of support, and about 6 personnel each. So when you're talking about the entire brigade package, 3,200 folks and all their trucks and all their kilos and artillery and everything else that goes with them, we've really got about 6 folks, doctrinally speaking. Below those, as they're lined right now, this is all in flux, it'll change, but most of the BCTs are lined. They've got 3 maneuver battalions underneath them. 2 of the primary function that usually need something along the lines of the cavalry school that all have tactical support as well. So typically we've got battalion ALO or an EBALO. We don't have an officer to send down there that's got a JTAC qualification. About 1 additional JTAC and then 2 patrols. Supposed to be going 5. And like I said, this is broad brush doctrine. I'm not talking about what we are actually doing down the range or have been for the last several years, because it really is situational. So, I'll leave it at that. In addition to that, you've got TAC teams, and as I talked about earlier, you've got 1 JTAC, 1 ROMAC, and those are the folks that you can push down company or levels wherever you need them. Really go get in amongst them and make the good work happen. So. And then obviously we've got some of our own support. We've got vehicle maintenance folks, we've got supply folks, we've got our own power pro folks who work on generators, which we are in the middle of nowhere. We obviously have a lot of electronic equipment. So we've got as far as the full UTC tasking goes, we've got to have those folks available to us as well. And then some other regular support, depending on the size of the operation. This is how we're tasked. I'm sure all of you, at least the blue suiters, have heard, the standard air expeditionary force buckets that everybody in the Air Force likes to fall into. We don't play in that realm, nor do we typically get deployed as a full package. It's 1 guy here, 2 guys there, 3 other guys going to do some cool guy stuff. It's all over the place. So it's almost unheard of to really mobilize an entire unit for how we're organized.
There's a question. I want to make sure I understand this right, just to make sure people understand the term UTC is unit type code. A lot of cadets in here have not seen that before. Essentially, it's military-wide. It's the term we use for any unit of combat or anything. It's called a unit type code. That's how the logistic people plan it that way. So I just wanted to clarify that. The other thing is, if you've got, see, you support a brigade combat team, say infantry brigade combat team, and you say there's 6 TAC personnel assigned to each brigade level. That's just the brigade level, right? So then there's also, you got six folks, not just officers, but you got an officer and 5 enlisted assigned to the brigade level to basically do whatever they need to do. And then under that, in each one of the 3 maneuver battalions, you have 4 TAC personnel assigned with, living with, sleeping with, etc.
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, it's in how the Army organizes themselves at the higher echelon of the brigade, and then there's others who get into the TAC guys. Doctrinally speaking, going to have 6 folks living in headquarters. Going to cover down on 3,200-ish person unit, and then at the lower echelons, then we'll start pushing folks down. But at the maneuver battalions, 3 each per brigade, doctrinally speaking, full personnel there. That's the BALO or EBALO, the JTAC, and then TAC teams that they're supposed to be moved around. But good point to bring up is, just like you do when you're in garrison at home and training, when you're deployed, you live with the Army. You're on an Army combat outpost or their forward operating base. You're bunking with them, you're eating with them, you're there with them all the time. So more killer boats and bring more stuff here shortly. Kind of to give you an idea of some of these concepts, we're going to talk doctrine for a while, and once again I'll preface this with the caveat of this is not how we're doing business, or have we been for the last 10 years, and the next one will be some completely different way of doing business. But doctrinally speaking, this is what we try to do. All right, start off, we've got the Army Air Force liaison on, and basically what that does is we, the Blue Mother Air Force, have said, hey, you big green Army, we're willing to give you some folks that have some special skill sets to help you reach your desired density via air power. On the flip side, the Green Army has said, hey, you Air Force, we are offering some combat experience, subject matter experts that are going to go to your air bases and talk to your air crew, etc., about what's going on the ground so that we can better help one another out. And we'll be talking in depth about that here shortly. But then also, it also lays down I'm an Air Force guy, I'm deploying with an Army unit as a TAC-D. The Army owes me some things, like batteries to run all of this stuff, or like food to eat while I'm living, like bullets for my weapon, because occasionally I'm getting shot at and I prefer to shoot back. Those sorts of things. So the onus is on the Army to provide me all those expendable kinds of items. And in return, they're going to get my expertise on how to drop really heavy pieces of weaponry into bad guys. We've got the JTAC mod, and this is a cross-service agreement. We'll talk more in depth about some of the manuals come up here shortly. This is Joint Forces Command. Kind of owns this program, but it covers down on all of the United States branches of service and how we are going to declare someone capable of saying the words cleared hot on the radio. At the end of the day, the Joint Terminal Attack Controller, JTAC, is the only person who will ever say those words on the radio. And so this very clearly defines what qualifications this person must have, what level of experience, where they come from, in what circumstances they can use this. But the Marine Corps, for instance, kind of does their own thing. We've got a ground commander that is trying to take a piece of dirt, but he also, or she, owns the airplanes that are supporting. Obviously, the Army doesn't own airplanes, and the Air Force doesn't take dirt. So that's how we work together to make that happen. And so it takes a lot of coordination between the services, and this is where it's all drafted. The Bible, as we call it, is our Joint Code 309-3. It covers all things closer to the doctrines. There are other documents that cover how we're going to break that down and specific techniques we're going to use, etc. And some gradual development. But at the end of the day, the Joint Code, as we call it, JP 309.3, covers how we're going to deploy airspace, how we're going to plan, how we're going to execute, terminology and the comm that we're going to use, especially any of you that are getting into an operational kind of curriculum, be it TAC-D, any other kind of battlefield airman flying airplanes. Their specific words mean very specific things. So clear, concise, and correct is huge to make stuff happen quickly and everyone's on the same page. So this is where we draw this information from, as well as the J-Fire. We'll talk more about that here shortly, but it's how we do a variety of other things other than airplanes with bombs on them. Those in Spurfield have the opportunity to interface with a lot of different weapon systems using a variety of different ways to kill folks and regular stuff. And this is where we're able to have a common ground with folks in other services on how to do this. So it doesn't matter if I'm talking to an Air Force airplane or a Navy airplane or a Marine Corps or an AC-130, which works a little differently, or an Army helicopter. I know how to do that. Big parts working together. Before we get into tax acts and kind of the hierarchy. Allocation versus apportionment, and I'm going to keep this short because I can go on for days on how the Flight Forces commanders and delegates this forward. Big picture is, we decide to go to war. We'll use Iraq and Afghanistan as a perfect example. We've got a overall combatant commander that owns the entire theater, and that individual is responsible for everything that happens there. Some of that duty is delegated, bless you, to some folks from the Army and some folks from the Air Force, because we're going to need folks on the ground and we're going to need folks in the air bombs to make this all happen. Well, amongst all the other things going on, and we'll get more into it here shortly, is that air component commander is going to say, okay, close air support, pretty big deal in Afghanistan, and it was in Iraq. It's not like we're getting shot at by other airplanes very frequently, so we don't need to spend a whole lot of time worrying about shooting down other airplanes. We don't need to spend a whole lot of time about strategic shaping operations, etc. Close air support is neat of what's going on, and things related to it, like I also said. But that air component commander is going to go, okay, Army, 80% of all the sorties that I can put in the theater are yours. Is anybody confused on what a sortie is? Airplane flying mission. Okay. So, 80% of all the sorties I can generate in the theater are yours for close air support. And the Army commander goes, okay, now where am I going to put it? And so a key thing, and it's often confused in the close air support realm, is Air Force folks aren't making the decisions on release airplanes. We provide a lot of input. There's a whole lot of whisper in the air, hey, sir, what do you think about this? But at the end of the day, it's someone or in the United States Army on their uniform that is making the call. Where they're going to, maybe this special operation is more important than 400 folks trying to take that same, that's up. Is there anything else for that? Just trying to keep it.
Oh, you can go on allocation and apportionment, and how all that happens up at the 3 and 4 star level. You can go on about that for days, and it's the kind of stuff that makes your skull hurt. But we got some of those folks with 80-pound brains at the Air Operations Center that can make all of that happen. They got some real high-speed computers to crunch all the numbers and calculations that go into that. Because, for instance, there's some poor maintenance officer that's getting told, yeah, we want 20 airplanes to produce 500 sorties in a day. And he's going, can't get there from here. It takes, realistically, X amount of time to turn an airplane from land to being able to take off again. Oh, by the way, we got to have enough crews to put in the cockpits, and you can only do it so many times a day. And so there's, like I said, there's really smart folks to figure all that out, and then are able to tell the combatant commander, here's what we can provide with these forces.
All right, as we continue, Air Support Operations Squadron is TACD, the 2 words on this together. So we talked about what that acronym means, but we support the maneuver elements. It's the folks on the ground taking dirt, making bad guys go away. But as we talked about, there's also an opportunity where a lot of our folks will get farmed out. And in fact, these guys have some experience recently where your mission may change from day to day, whether you're supporting a conventional maneuver force or your special forces folks. The Ranger bats for folks in green, they don't know what that means. Have TACD in here now, as well as the other organizations, CIA. Obviously, that there's an ALO component that's me talking to, commander of whatever supported Army echelon we're working with. Sir, here's what we got. Here's what's in the ATO. Here's what we do. We'll talk more about here shortly. But here's what Big Blue Air Force can provide for you. Here's what you told me your end state goal is, and I can cogitate on that bombers, we can bring fighters, we've got, you know, all kinds of space capability, ISR capability, other things that I can, through various means, start requesting support to achieve whatever the end state goal is. At the end of the day, if you don't own the dirt, you've lost the dirt. So we can have the air all day long. So it's trying to get, but we are, no kidding, a dedicated part of the Army Support Commanders Special Staff, which means, and we'll talk more about it. No kidding, we're in the headquarters. We're part of every planning meeting, targeting cycle, determining what's important to strike and what's not so important to strike. If I blow up this, you know, target over here, am I going to shut down the power grid to the whole place and just make 100 more insurgents? All of those kinds of things. We're very much involved in that process at JTAC and more so than cable. Joint Terminal Attack Controller. It is not a career. There's a lot of confusion about what a JTAC is. A JTAC is a person with a very special qualification. My AFSC is 11F. I'm a firefighter. However, I am JTAC qualified. Unlike you know, some of the Army MOSs, etc., it's not a one-time good deal for the school. You got the special designator on you down, you're on your way. It's something you've got to keep up with constantly. It's like flying an airplane, check right cycle. It's the same sort of thing. In fact, I'm about to start flying with the Tulsa unit, so I'm going to be that guy chasing 3 check rides around, 2 in the airplane and 1 as a JTAC. But it's something you've got to work on constantly.
One of the most frightening things I do as a commander is sign that Air Force Form 8 that certifies a young airman as a JTAC. Because, as Major Tapp said, they are the only ones in the world that can say cleared hot on the radio and stuff starts falling off the airplane close to the good guys. Okay. JTAC goofs, and it's not just a little goof, it can be on Al Jazeera before the guys get back to the file. And we have just severely adversely impacted our national goals. So it's, like I said, it's one of the scariest things I do is sign that guy on. Or when I'm given the check ride, because I know what's happening on the other end.
It's a tremendous amount of responsibility that's placed on, unlike a lot of the other verticals. Typically speaking, on the United States Air Force, it's officers that you got to be an officer to go sit in one of those airplanes and leave things go boom. This is quite a different story. In fact, I've got one senior airman who's JTAC qualified, who's in Afghanistan as we speak, who more so than the commander he's supporting probably understands the rules of engagement, probably understands the implications of collateral damage, and understands what the weapon effect is and how to go about prosecuting it. So it's a tremendous amount of responsibility. And like I said, the bulk of our JTACs are this person. So it's not the normal paradigm that we're used to in the Air Force. Obviously, there's a very lengthy certification process to include formal course, formal upgrade training via IPT, which these 2 gentlemen can or both in right now. The MPT when they come back, and then the check writing and so forth. That's really immediate. That's good enough to go to war, and then you start to really get started. Because not only are we working close air support, obviously airplanes that belong to the Air Force, we speak the language, but naval surface fire, so we can make guns on boats, shoot stuff on the ground. All fire with the Army's artillery, some orders. Close combat attack, so the CCA term, which I know is one of the first acronyms supplied. That's basically a method that I can take a helicopter, it's got some paint on it, and put it on bad guys in a hurry. Obviously, the non-traditional intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance is what NTISR is. We spent a lot of time doing forensic work with the Joint, for instance, JSTARS, some some other assets that are out there, and put the pieces together. And that's really what it is. As well as the gunship, everybody's favorite crowd pleaser. But as an Air Force person, you get the opportunity to do some really neat stuff, to include what we call the quote-unquote cool guy schools that the Army's got to offer. So you want to go to Ranger School, you want to go basic airborne, air assault, Pathfinder, RSLIC, the surveillance leadership. The opportunities are out there, and we're one of the very few career fields in the Air Force that has the chance to send folks through that. So, you want to go jump out of perfectly good airplanes? Good. And then obviously we talked about serious stuff. On the Army side, we've got some ways to spread out our ability to cover a group of folks because there are so few of us, and because we're talking about, for instance, a 3,200 person brigade combat team. It's and I've got a very limited number of personnel to be able to push them to every level. Part of the JFO is the Army creating JFO. Yeah, both of you guys went through JFO. So, but it's an Army course. They get some extra academics and practical exercises in how to conduct close air support and those sorts of things, and how we format information to make things happen quickly and effectively. They are not JFOs. So, the key to remember, especially for the guys in the Army, is you will have JFOs in whatever unit you go to. They are not JFOs. They will never say they're hot on the radio unless they're one of the very few really high-speed folks that are Ranger bats somewhere. But they can provide me a lot of information so that I can have 3 or 4 different JFOs and help them, with their targeting problems and making bad guys go away, as opposed to I'm on one hill with one unit getting shot at, and now I don't really have the extra bandwidth to handle what's going on in the adjacent area of operation. So it allows us the ability to cover down.
2 quick questions. One, so let me make sure I got this straight. The Army gets to decide what gets attacked, right, and what effects they want. And they say to an Air Force JTAC, who has to be JTAC qualified because they know all the weapons. And the JTAC, essentially, that Air Force senior airman, staff sergeant, or if it's lieutenant, whatever, that's with that Army unit, that person gets to decide what air asset strikes that target. Is that correct?
We'll talk a little more about it in tax ags here momentarily, about how those airplanes flow. Higher, doctrinally speaking, at the Army Corps level is where those decisions are made because they've got a CASOC, or Operations Center, sitting there to help flow airplanes where they're needed. But if I'm a JTAC on the ground and I'm with my company commander, and we're out and all of a sudden we start pushing fire, and I've got some air either on station or we get some air, and we'll talk about the immediate ISR process momentarily. But my job at that point as a JTAC is to go, sir, what do you want to do? And he's going to look at me and go, you can go away. I'm going to look at him and go, I've got a 2-ship of 8-10s with this, and based on collateral damage, based on our ability to maintain positive notification of the enemy, all the ROE triggers, etc., based on our proximity to the enemy, going, hey, we're 100 yards from these guys, but all they've got is 2,000-pound bombs. We've got some things to talk about. Or we say clear hot on the radio.
So these guys are not only weapons experts, they're experts in the law of armed conflict, right? They know.
In a lot of cases, you almost have to be, because, you duck down and these guys can talk more about their most recent experience, but there's a lot of stuff going on, and, your bullets going by, and everybody's like, make them die, make them die, make them die. It's like, okay, maybe that's the right answer, and maybe we've got the tool set with the airplanes to do it, or maybe you got to just pick up land forward, shoot the guy in the face. So it's kind of weighing, proportionality and let the weapons can be used. At the end of the day, the air crew is always the weapons expert. They've got the formal training on, okay, it's 18-inch thick concrete reinforced walls, single-story building. I know how many bombs I need to make it either A, turn big squishy bodies into mist, or B, drop the whole building, depending on what the ground commanders do. So that's where the conversation with the JTAC takes place. You know, okay, sir, what do you want to do? Am I trying to get them to break contact, make their ears ring, and then too dizzy to be able to shoot at me so we can leave? Am I trying to kill guys inside the building, or do you want the whole darn place to turn to dust? Because it's a very different weaponry approach. And so that's where the JTAC comes in. What's the intent? Because yeah, maybe I can throw some 30 millimeter, explosives at them from a Gal-8 on an A-10, get their attention and scare them, and they break contact, and then we just drive off into the sunset and all is well. Maybe it's going to take a couple 2,000 pounders to level the building because that's what we're trying to achieve. But that's not a decision.
Right. Now, if there's an Army unit at, say, any level, and I'm just going to say platoon, okay, and they find themselves in a situation where there's no JTAC, they're immediately going to default back up to the last level of unit, whether it be squad or battalion, that has a JTAC, right? In other words, they need fire. So somebody can be out there without a JTAC and still get support, right?
The intent is, yes, that there would be someone JTAC qualified, and which is why, based on our UTC that we kind of went over at the battalion level, you're going to have a couple JTACs. And then at the brigade level, you're going to have someone there that's qualified to say they're out on the radio. Granted, if I'm not there with them, there's going to be a whole lot of pulling information as far as battle tracking goes, and where good guys are, where bad guys are, what's around them, etc. There are other avenues with emergency cast to make that happen, but it's cumbersome. It doesn't happen one each private stuff. You can pick up the radio and it says JTAC's dead, and you go, hey, I need some help. So there are procedures for that as well. But ideally, in the way it's kind of structured as far as where we fill in various echelons, yes, you can go to the next higher level. Anything to pile on
I
that?
was going to say, there are methodologies for emergency gas, but as a flight lead, if I hear non-certified JTAC on the radio and I go, oh boy, all the hair on the back of my neck has just stood up at rigid attention, and so I'm going to be very, very diligent. Now, obviously you want effects on the ground as quick as you can, but I'm going to be very diligent in making sure I get a good sort on where the good guys are, where the bad guys are, where the non-combatants are. We've done a whole lot of missions over in Afghanistan. I'm not going to go into the exact number, but it's hundreds and hundreds of missions. And to date, we have 0 fratricide and 0 civilian casualties, which is a pretty damn good record. But that's because we worked with these guys and ourselves really, really hard before we went out the door to make sure it's perfect the first time, every time. So, yeah, emergency gas, then it's on flight day. And you get all that extra flight detail. Oh, wait a minute, I didn't see that in my LES. Did you? But that's part of the job.
So it certainly is a tremendous amount of responsibility. No faster way to end up on something.
We're all just here.
But so to top that off, we do draw a lot of information. We do work very closely with some folks in the Army that have very special qualifications as JFOs, and I can support them in that exact circumstance where I don't have to have a JFO with every platoon that's running. I can have a JFO. Someone I trust, someone I've worked with, someone who's got rigid currency qualification requirements with it, so that when that individual comes over the radio, I don't have to have all the arrow lines. picture takeaways as far as close air support or the words that there's a million different missions in the United States Air Force. Close air support equals a couple of things. We're in close proximity, so bad guys in close to good guys, and detailed integration, like I was talking about. Hey, Army guy, do you want this 2,000 pounder 100 meters away? Because all of our areas are going to be great. And maybe sometimes the answer is yes. The ways we go about doing this as a JTAC is various types of control. Type 1 control without getting way in the weeds on definitions, although y'all will be quizzed later, since you should have this memorized for your course. But big picture is I can see the target, I can see the airplane, I can look up and see where the nose is pointed, and make sure that whatever's falling or getting shot from that aircraft is indeed pointed at bad guys, because I'm probably not too far away from the bad guys. If we're extremely close, we're probably going to use that at all possible. So I don't have a little buzzer that I'm shooting at them. Type 2 control is, there's a variety of ways to get there, and we've got some info to talk about here and how we do that. Whether if I'm back at fire headquarters, like at the JFO out front with any supported Army unit, I might have a rotor feed where I'm looking at the target pod footage real time from either Predator or something like that, or the actual target pod on the aircraft that's going to deploy the ordnance. The big picture is I've got to see one or the other, but I don't need to see both. And then type 3 control is kind of elementary stuff. Okay, I got a warm fuzzy, you know where the target's at, go kill it. I'll give you a time restriction or say, hey, keep shooting until you're out of ordnance and go home. Call me when you're done. Fairly rare unless we're about to get overrun by brigade tanks. But there are in more symmetric warfare kinds of applications where that would be the case. Where you use type 2 control. Maybe I'd go type 2 early on and go, yep, verified, flight lead, indeed is shooting where I intend to shoot. Now, okay, you got it, go for it. Call me when you're done because I'm going over here and working with the helos to kill these other folks.
You see that column of tanks coming down the road? Take as many as you can.
And then we touched on it just a few minutes ago, but emergency gas. So gas was something who's non-JTAC qualified, where the onus is back on the air crew at that point. And realize, as TAC-P, we live with the Army. We plan with the Army. We're part of their targeting cell. We know what they should know if everybody's communicating like they're supposed to be, what their ground order battle looks like, what their scheme of maneuver is. We're going to port on this town. I know where they're going to set up choke points. I know where they're going to set up, their blocking positions. I have all of this information. So as a JTAC, you're much better equipped to go, I know what's going on. I have a fairly good idea of where good guys should be and where good guys should not be. In the 3 tours in Iraq I did flying the F-16, who knows? I don't know. Show up, you say, hey, go over here, talk to this guy. Okay, hey, what's going on? Oh, crap, we're getting shot at. Well, I don't know where this at. I don't even know what the hell you're in town for. So tell me what you want and we'll work on it. So ECAS is extremely scary in that you put a lot of onus on a flight lead, who at the end of the day is the person who's got to hit the red button to make things go boom. So that's the last voting member in the kill chain. But they don't have a lot of situational awareness in most cases. They may have some products. I'll be honest with you, every time I've flown in combat, I walk out the door with like 12 different operators on my legs. I don't know, it's lottery today. We'll see which one we go to, or I might go to a whole different one that nobody's even talking about. And drop every bomb and shoot every bullet I've got. So, ECAS, we try to avoid that, and between all the gizmos and gadgets and JFOs and other folks, we try to provide any JTAC in the loop. That last person before somebody starts hitting red buttons and try to put the pieces together. So, does that make sense? See what more sounds. Tax eggs. All right, I know this is an eye chart. I will break it down for you in very simple terms. What this is the Theater Air Control System dash Army Air Ground System. how between Victory and Army and the Blue Air Force, we're able to coordinate with one another and have the appropriate liaison elements in place across various levels of our command structure. Really don't want to talk about that a whole lot, but the big picture is you've got your Joint Forces Commander here, owns the war, okay? So, the entirety of whatever the United States of America was up to that individual. And it starts getting broken down, and we'll start hitting on some key points. You'll get more of this down the road where you fall into the structure. The Air Operations Center, sometimes referred to as the 5-year Operations Center, which is how we're operating now. That's part in the command control structure I'm talking about.
It's hard to hear you back here with the air on.
Oh, sorry. All right. Free hack. Joint Force Commander owns the entirety of the battle space and everything in it, and everyone in it. Where we really start to interface in this overall system is right here at the AOC, the Air Operations Center. So, as a case in point, currently, these folks live in Qatar, and it's a massive complex. There have been, most of us have done tenants at the AOC at some point in there, but you're talking about a group of neighborhood of probably 1,000 folks. This is where the entirety of how we're going to employ all of our air power, and it doesn't matter if it's airplanes flying off boats with the Navy, whether it's Air Force, foreign countries, coalition partners that are flying with us, how we're going to use the satellites, all the way down to search and rescue operations if that becomes necessary. Everything gets generated there. We'll talk about the air tasking order cycle here shortly, but that is where all of that takes place. So, big picture, what that means to TACP is anything I expect to be sent to me as an asset available to kill bad guys and break their stuff, that's where I'm going to get that information. Or if I have a specific request, because I know my Army commander has something coming down the pipe, some big operation, and I'm going to need some sort of effect, whether it be bombs or jammers or targeting pods or all sorts of other stuff. That's where I'm going to attempt to make that happen. We'll talk about the process. Obviously, underneath the AOC, because this is all things air, you've got all your air bases. But just to kind of point out, we're not going to talk about it a lot, but just like we've got TACP, Air Force folks who speak Air Force language embedded with Army units, we've got your ground liaison officers. These are Army folks embedded at Air Force bases who can take a one each of the Dragon fighter pilot and explain what the infantry is trying to achieve, or how they're going to go about doing it, so that if I show up with my M16 and a bunch of bombs, I hopefully have somewhat of an idea of what's going on. And that's what. And like I said, I'm not going to hit on all of this because a lot of it doesn't apply to TACP, but it is a giant mess. But all the way up to doctrinally speaking, at the Florida level in the Army, we've got TACP, and this is where our Air Support Operations Center lives. These are the folks that process requests. So I'm on each JTAC running around, holy crap, I'm getting shot at, I need somebody to come save me. These folks are going to get that request. And then, like I said, each theater is different. As we're operating down the range right now, this is how it's set up. If World War III kicked off tomorrow, this is what we start with. Like I like to say, first casualty, of course, the plan. So this is the plan. So.
Flexibility is the key there.
Before? But down to the division level is where you start seeing standard 1H ASOS start to have presence. So if you were in active duty Air Force ALO, coming down to Fort Hood, for instance, they have a division package, and there are several in guard as well. moving down the brigade, so like I said, the unit we're with covers 2 of these. And our TAC unit there, down in the battalion level, and these are folks out doing the good work. The TAC unit there, and then the TAC normally not speaking TJ TAC that I can farm out to various companies or units or whatever the case might be. Did I lose anybody so far? Any questions on the spaghetti diagram? All right, there's a lot of moving pieces in this, and especially as ALOs, if you were to go to the 13 Lima route, there's a lot of other folks in the loop that aren't broken down specifically between Air Force intel personnel, AMLOs, so folks that are familiar with how to move lots of large stuff, large airplanes around. So I'm a 16 guy. I don't know a whole lot about what it takes to get a C-17 in and out of the Austin airfield in the middle of the desert. So we've got those elements embedded as well, as well as various folks throughout the ISR will get space and work and stuff flying over the top of us. But as an ALO, it's important to know that you really kind of have to have SA on pretty much everything. What the AWACS can do, whatever the joint, what the JSTARS can do. Obviously, in this forum, I'm not going to get into it because of classification stuff, but having an in-depth knowledge and being in the know, at least a few of us, to be able to make those recommendations, to be able to request the appropriate effects, so that I might have an operation and go, do this. Wouldn't it be great to have a ribbon on it? We go, hey, what can you guys do for me? If I've got enough lead time to try to pull that off, or maybe I need a satellite to fly over and get some really high speed imagery for me, et cetera. So that's really kind of where the planning process for the officers comes in. You get it with it. Somebody earlier was asking me about air traffic control functions. There's a lot of that in this diagram. Obviously, AWACS, big radar on top. CRC, these are the folks